Hello, hello, and welcome everyone. My name is Darren Press, and I'm with Intel. And in fact, specifically, I'm with Intel Drone Light Shows. And I'm super excited that you're able to join us today and really spend the next hour getting into the science behind the art. We have a couple of exceptional guests with us. We have some folks from the creative side, from the engineering side, from the actual piloting side. We have a couple of drones with us in hand. So we're going to get into the weeds. We're going to find out exactly how we make these shows happen and what kind of great effect it has on the audiences. So why don't we start with a video that gives a couple minute background as to what an Intel Drone Light Show is. Let's take a look.
Billions of people around the world have been amazed and delighted by Intel's drone light shows. Some see it as an engineering marvel. Others consider it a new form of art. To make it all come together for you, Intel has a highly skilled and experienced team of engineers and artists. It starts with site planning, when flight areas, spectator positions, and viewing angles are identified. During this process, the three-dimensional canvas in the sky is defined, and the team is working with aviation officials and other regulatory bodies to acquire the necessary approvals. Every Intel drone light show begins with an initial concept, a story to tell. The show evolves through an iterative and collaborative process of sketches, drawings, storyboards, and music development. Once the direction of the show is defined, the technical work of bringing these ideas to life begins using 3D modeling and animation software. The motion path and trajectories of the fleet of Intel Shooting Star drones are computed by carefully controlled particle simulation. An important element of the drone light show experience is the music. This is a critical element of the LED animation process, as certain cues in the score will trigger transitions and LED effects. We love working directly with composers on custom soundtracks to make each drone light show unique. The drone light show is considered complete when all the LEDs are perfectly choreographed to the soundtrack. Once the composition of the Intel drone light show is complete, testing and validation begins. Intel's simulation software helps preview trajectories and LED sequence of the drone light show. At the show's location, our operations team will have taken care of shipping, infrastructure build-out, security, and setup and staging of the airfield. Each Intel drone light show is operated by our team of licensed pilots, professional show controllers, and qualified visual observers. All that's left to do is for our clients and the audience to look up and enjoy the show. Let's work together to make your next event spectacular.
Very cool indeed. I love watching that video because it really shows how many steps it takes to actually to make a performance happen. And I think that's part of what is going to make today exciting. We're going to find out exactly what are those steps, what it takes to make it happen. And today is about a conversation. We're going to have a conversation with our experts, but then we're also going to have a conversation with you. So if you have any questions that you can think of that might pop up that are relevant to what you're seeing on the screen or something that we're talking about, by all means, please put it in the chat and then we'll take a look at it. And then if we have enough time, which I'm hoping, we'll be able to get to answering all of your questions and provide all the sort of that behind the scenes clarity that you're looking for. So let's go right into what a drone actually is. Let's click to the next slide, please. So technically speaking, a drone is a flying robot, and you may know of it from either photography or videography, maybe even hobby racing. And in fact, this was a drone that I got from my son for the holidays last year, and you can see it even has a camera on it as well. But this is a toy drone. This is for fun. This is the kind of thing that we actually fly it out at the park. But it's not used for any professional purposes. This is just me, him, hanging out, having a good time with a drone. So then there's a business purpose for drones. Let's go to the next slide and we can talk about a couple of those paths to how drones are used. So you may have seen in a recent movie or maybe a commercial where there's some incredible flyover shot. That's probably a drone. Back in the old days, it used to be a helicopter that you would put the camera on, maybe even from the news that you've seen, helicopter footage. But the drone is much smaller, much more easily controlled, can be controlled by one pilot, and can be used in a way to generate these promotional films or content or collateral that are part of videos or movies. Also, what's been really exciting is delivery of packages. So you may have read about it recently, and as time goes on over the next couple of years, you're going to begin to see more of this automated delivery process. Perhaps it's for medical supplies or for packages, but the kind of future technology that's kind of coming to us today. Very cool indeed. The other thing from a business perspective, cell towers, bridges, oil and gas refineries, you got to think about big, giant mechanical devices like an oil and gas rig. What's the easy way to inspect it? Think about a bridge, the effort that it takes to put someone in a harness on a rope, have them climb up to the top to be able to inspect the top of that bridge, make sure everything's okay, and then come down and give that report. The drone is a safer, smarter way that it very quite easily, you can send that drone up into the sky, you can take a look, you can see what's cooking, send it back to the team down on the ground. And then what we're really here to talk about today, which is a drone light show for entertainment. And so again, this was for the toy. I don't have one of those commercial drones because I'm not inspecting bridges, but there's a specific type of drone that's used for a drone light show. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I think this is really cool, but I did ask my friends and my colleagues and coworkers at Intel to send me one of those drone light shows. Now, I'm not one of the pilots. I'm not one of the animators. I'm not even on the project management team. I'm the one who gets to help tell the stories about what an Intel drone light show does for its audiences. And so this one, as you can see, it's pretty small. It's pretty lightweight. I'm able to hold it in my hand. It's got a little bit bigger than my head. Maybe if I move it back a little bit like this. It has 4 propellers on it. And so sometimes you may have heard it referred to as a quadcopter. Kind of makes sense, sort of a small helicopter, but with 4 blades. What's cool about this one is that this one is built and designed specifically for an Intel drone light show. So there's no other one like this on the planet. Actually, there's probably a few thousand of them that we use in our shows, but no one else uses these for any other purpose other than our shows. And it can go up to 14 miles per hour, so it can actually control itself in higher gust winds as opposed to maybe this toy drone that I have, which a little bit of wind might send it sideways. It has 4 high-powered LEDs in it, so there's actually 4 lights in the bottom of this, and those 4 lights, get this, and I was blown away when I read this, you can create 4 billion color combinations. So quite literally, whatever color you can dream up, it can be created and become a pixel of light in the sky. And so in the video that you saw earlier, you saw that we were able to kind of use this idea of pixels of light. So you think about your television, think about your computer monitor, maybe even what we're on today. You think about all of those little individual pixels that are creating the picture that you see. In this case, you're looking at my face, and all the different sort of pixels of light. Same principle here. The difference is it's not on the screen, but it's up in the sky, hundreds of feet up in the sky. In fact, we have one of our pilots with us today who is going to be able to talk to some of the specifics as to how high they can go, how high do they go, et cetera. And then the other very cool thing that I thought was the fact that it's got GPS. So you think about your phone, maybe you can think about your car, how you're going to get from point A to point B, and you can use a map, and the map is tracking you by way of GPS. There's a GPS device in here that allows us to speak directly to the computer that's controlling it and the pilot, and then actually speak to the satellites above to be able to ensure they are in the exact right place at the exact right time in order to create those pictures, those visuals. You saw in the video earlier, you saw things like the Olympic rings. You had seen other shapes, and there was some very cool ways to think about how do you make a picture, turn it into pixels, and then put those pixels up in the sky to create that picture. Now, before we get into a little bit more detail as to what it takes to make this happen, let's talk about where you might see one of these shows. Let's click to the next slide. So just this past holiday season, we had a fantastic partnership with our friends at Walmart, and we put on the holiday drone light show. This was a touring show that went around to various locations around the country, and it was amazing to see all the fabulous, iconic holiday imagery and iconography designed with music and animated and put up in the sky. And so it may be for some kind of event and celebration like we did just a couple months ago. It could be for a national event. It could be for July 4th. It's a replacement for fireworks even. You think maybe a product launch. If you're going to launch a new brand or say, hey, we have a new car that we're going to release and we want to make a giant impact, you're going to put that story in the sky, and then you can imagine how many people are seeing it in person and then how many people are filming it on their phones and inevitably tweeting it out or Instagramming it out to be able to help sort of expand the impact of your launch. Movie and TV premiere. We're going to watch a video clip of one that was really exciting that happened down in Los Angeles a couple years ago. Sporting events. Super Bowl. You may have seen the Super Bowl halftime show. That was Intel drone light shows up in the air. Even the Olympics. To think about that opening ceremonies and the quantity of drones. So I'm not talking just one of these. I'm talking thousands of these in the sky to create those Olympic rings. That's the kind of impact that you can make on, in the case of the Olympics and the Super Bowl, you're touching the lives of millions upon millions of people. And then even probably one of the coolest ways where you can see it is with theme parks, be it at Disney or Universal Studios. I'm listing out a lot of the people that we worked with, collaborated with, and partnered with in order to create these experiences for their customers and for their audiences. So, before we get into the next clip, I actually want to remind you, ask me questions, put it right into the chat. We'll take a look at it, and then by all means, we're going to get you those answers. So this next show was one of those Hollywood movie premieres. Let's take a look at this video, and then we'll talk about it right afterwards.
Tonight we're going to be premiering for the home entertainment release of Wonder Woman, and we're going to do a drone light show with 300 drones. I've seen the animation on simulation. I'm seeing it live tonight. It's just a proud moment for all of us.
This is one of the biggest animations that we've ever flown. We've had so many people work really hard in order to give us not just the drones themselves, but the firmware, the software, the whole stack is all built by Intel. And then to have that moment that as a pilot, we get the privilege of flying this show is something that it's really hard to put into words.
We've never worked with the entertainment industry, and we're excited to expand on that and showcase what drone light shows can do at movie premieres.
I think it'll be pretty impressive and so cool to see your own movie logo up in the sky. I've shot with drones as a camera, but nothing like this. I've never seen them coordinated like that. I've got my whole family. We're like, we can't wait to see.
3, 2, 1, 0.
Nothing is impossible now. We've been at theme parks, National Day parades, countdown to the Asian Games, we'll be at the Olympics, and now we're in Hollywood. This is absolutely amazing for us.
I love that video. I could probably watch that video till the cows come home. It's so exciting to hear it even in sync with the music. And the coolest thing about that show is that was a completely all-female crew that put that performance on. And so I want you to think about this. Who are the people that make these shows reality? Let's go to the next slide, please. And I want to introduce you to 3 colleagues of mine and 3 people that it's just a joy to be able to work with. We have Charlene. Charlene's one of our animators. We have Shilpa, who's one of our project managers, and then Clay, who's one of our pilots. So as you can see up in the top left corner of the screen, we called out three components: animate, prepare, and perform. And so Charlene is really the anchor behind the animation phase of putting one of these shows on. So Charlene has a BA in game design art. She's based out of San Jose, California. Charlene, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and answering any questions that might come up. Why don't you start by telling us what your favorite drone light show is?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. My favorite drone light show that I made was, it took place in Malaysia. It was for the Johor Football Club client. It was for a public audience, but what was cool is that the Crown Prince also came to see it. So that was very interesting. And in general, the show was very challenging to me from a creative standpoint, but it also demonstrates everything I've learned in the past 2 years. So that's why I love it.
And so that was a show over in, you said it was in Malaysia. So does that mean these shows can be done anywhere around the world?
Yeah, we've done shows in a ton of major countries and cities. And I've personally went to 4 different countries, but yeah, they take place anywhere.
Very cool. And then I see that you had a degree in game design art. Number one, I didn't even know that I could actually get a degree in game design art. I'm sure my son would want to get a degree in playing games. So tell me about your path, kind of where when you started to do art in high school, I'm guessing, and then had a portfolio and went that way, or kind of tell us a little bit about your education background to get to where you are today.
Yeah, so I was very interested in ceramics and thinking about how to make my ideas come to life in clay. And I found a relationship between that and video games. And then I started looking to see if I could actually get a degree in it. And it was possible at that time. So I went to school for my BA for 4 years and now have a bachelor's in game design art, and we studied classes like level design and video games and a lot of general and fun courses.
Cool. And what's interesting is that you had a passion for sculpture, and you can think about sculpture being a 3-dimensional form factor, and how you are now, as a profession, you're really creating 3-dimensional form factors, but you're doing it up in the sky many times over. So it's a great little narrative to see that progression. So thank you for that. Shilpa, thank you so much for being with us today. Shilpa's one of our lead project managers. She actually had a different career path. She had a BS in mechanical engineering. She's based out of Phoenix, Arizona. Shilpa, why don't you introduce yourself by way of telling us what your favorite Intel Drone Light show was?
Thanks, Darren. It's a pleasure to be here. My favorite drone light show is the Apollo 11 moon landing 50th anniversary that we did at the Kennedy Space Center. I think the reason that that's my favorite is because it was a fantastic way to tie in the landing of the moon and the technology that went behind, creating that and then getting, human beings to land on the moon, and then how the technology has evolved to be able to do, drone light shows, the components that have changed from in the last 50 years.
That's cool. And in fact, I was just reading something about how the amount of computing power and technology that went into that command module that took the astronauts to the moon, that is now the equivalent to what's in our phone. And so to think about how over 50 years to sort of see their progression, I'm sure from your side of things, and really having that degree in mechanical engineering, to be able to see the connectivity between how exponentially you can bring technological advancement to society. It could be both for advancing science, but it can also be into advancing art. So tell us about your sort of educational and career path, kind of going from what your interests were in high school and then what you took that into college and then to where you are today.
Yeah, so in high school, I have to admit I was a bit of a geek, right? Was good in math and sciences, and it was naturally expected for me to go into engineering. But I was a little bit hesitant, because it was like I didn't want to be told what I should do. So I had a lot of book knowledge, but no hands-on experience. So after high school, I kind of decided to join, I did join the U.S. Army as a helicopter mechanic. And so got to learn a lot of the mechanical aspects of, being able to work with different mechanisms and learning the concepts behind how things actually work, not just in theory, but in application form. And then once I finished my tour with the Army, I went to college and got my degree in mechanical engineering, and worked as a process engineer in Intel for quite a while, which also helped me with being able to do the analytics as well as working on equipment. So kind of combine both worlds. Then it was, I felt like at that point I had learned a lot about the manufacturing side and the equipment side, and I kind of wanted to get into the business aspects of it. And that's how I got into the project manager and in the Drone Light Show team at Intel.
Very, very cool. I didn't know that you had served in the Army. So first and foremost, thank you for your service. But how cool to think that you have created this pathway. And just like with Charlene, like I'm sort of connecting the dots to sort of what your interests were, what you ended up doing, and what you're doing today. And I can see how your skills and abilities and expertise that you had learned in working on those helicopters, it's a very similar parallel to the kinds of ways you need to think on how to put these Intel drone light shows on, put these performances on. So very cool indeed. So thank you. And then the third component of putting on these shows is perform. And so we're lucky enough to have Clay Coleman with us. Clay he's our logistics manager and pilot. So he's actually the guy who gets to do the flying, which is super cool. He started his career as an FAA air traffic control specialist. So you think about when you're on a plane and maybe you're going on a family vacation, you're going to get on the plane. The pilot needs to go talk to the people up in the tower to be able to tell them, hey, it's time for you to take off now, or we're ready for you to land. That was Clay. So very cool indeed. I'm looking forward to hearing a little more about that. Clay's based out of Folsom, California. Clay, why don't you introduce yourself by telling us what your favorite show was? You
Thanks,
might
Darren.
be muted, Clay. There you go. So,
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here. My favorite show was the Bellagio Fountain Show in Las Vegas. You can see the image behind me. We flew some big images over the fountains and over the hotel there. And it was my favorite because we launched all the drones from the roof of the Bellagio, and we could look down and see the crowds building every night. We performed 8 nights in a row and 2 shows a night. So it seemed like every show we did, there was more and more people that would come and watch. So we could hear them cheering and clapping when the drones would fly. So that was a lot of fun.
That's cool to think about, sort of that different way of seeing it, as opposed to kind of the end audience, the end customer, sort of seeing it down while they're walking along the street. Because I've seen the fountains in front of that hotel. The thing about many people are probably looking up at it, and then there you were looking down at it. Now you did mention 2 shows a night, so that means the drones take off, land, and can recharge. And it's a battery operated thing? Is that how it works?
They are battery operated. They run anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes or even up to 15 minutes, depending on the winds. But after they would fly, we would take a break, let the drones charge for about a half hour, 45 minutes, and then we'd fly another show. Oh, cool. So in essence, you could have a permanent show. You could have something constantly running where the drones are going to be able to charge, take off, charge, and take off. So now that's specifically to drones, but I want to hear from you this thing about being an FAA air traffic control specialist. You would have never thought that you needed that kind of experience and or credentials to do what you do today. So maybe talk to us sort of about how you worked your way through what was inspiring you in high school and how that took you to the schooling to then go become that air traffic control specialist and then to today. Sure. I studied journalism and photography, and then when I became an air traffic controller, I continued in the photography hobby. When drones came about, I started with a toy drone like the one you showed earlier, and then graduated to a drone that had a bigger camera, a nice camera on it. And at the same time, the FAA was starting to see this technology emerge and found that they needed to develop some rules for drones because they fly in the same airspace as manned aircraft. So all those interests kind of collided at the same time, and that's how I got involved in drones. So when Intel started the Drone Light Show team, they needed somebody who could help navigate the regulatory climate and learn about the rules and stuff about flying drones, and so I started helping in that space, and that's how I joined the team.
Cool. It's interesting that you say, sort of the way you kind of come to Intel, same for you, Shilpa, and same for you, Charlene. And you kind of think about Intel as chip making and manufacturing and processing. And yet what this is doing is taking a whole new approach. So not many people might think of Intel as the top player in the drone light show space. But as I hear all of you talk about it and where your experiences are and what your expertise is in order to put these performances on, it kind of makes sense. We sort of need this spectrum of talent amongst the three of you in order to make these performances happen. And it's kind of like taking the best of what Intel does and then taking the best of this idea of a drone light show and then empowering it with the right team to be able to do it with three, quite frankly, very different and backgrounds, and to see all of you come together to be able to put a performance on is very cool. I have a cool question actually that came in about how high the drones can fly. Because Clay, you said, well, now we're competing with airspace. So, all right, so I'm thinking airplane is like 30,000 some odd feet up. So are we really competing with that? Like how high can these drones go? And then you also mentioned wind speed. So maybe just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Generally speaking, we can fly up to 400 feet just about anywhere in the country. Occasionally, our animations are quite large, so we need to fly a little bit higher, and we can get special permissions from the FAA for that. And the reason is if you're in a congested, mostly in bigger cities and so forth, where there's a lot of helicopter traffic, whether it be the law enforcement or health, medical helicopters, journalism or television stations have helicopters. Mm-hmm. Those fly quite low sometimes, as well as fixed wing aircraft. If you're close to an airport, obviously they have to fly quite a bit lower when they take off and when they land. So it can be a little bit complicated sometimes working together in that airspace.
Excellent. Now, I know a little further into today's conversation, you're going to go into the components of how the drone ends up at the actual show. And I don't want you to forget, AP had asked about how long it takes to charge. And so I want to make sure that when we do get to that one photo that I love of you, actually, you can talk a little bit about what that process is. So I want to jump into animate. I want to get into those details. So let's go to the next slide, please. And Charlene, if you could be so kind as to tell me what it is that I'm looking at. Because as far as I'm concerned, this looks like some sketches, doodles, something that you might see at the back of a notebook if you're bored in class, or in my case, bored at work, maybe. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so these are exactly that. They're doodles and sketches that we started and made for the Walmart holiday show. And some of these were actually implemented. For example, the reindeers, which you'll see later, are fully integrated into the show. And this is the first big step of making any show, is sketching and figuring out exactly the path forward on telling that story.
And being the artist, or sort of the representative artist when it comes to, so for example, Walmart says, hey, we want to do a holiday show. Mm-hmm. You sit down with the creative team at Walmart, and then and again, I'm used to seeing everything happening on an iPad now or some tablet. You're telling me this is an actual pencil on a piece of paper, and that's the kind of doodling you might do to ideate and then drive what the concepts that you'll create up in the sky?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's no direction forward if we don't have that first initial sketches. From there, we will further refine these into the drone forms and really start finding what lines we need to accentuate with the drones and how we're going to go forward, either volumetrically using 3D mesh, or maybe more in a flat style, especially with logos or things like that.
Got it. Well, you can see even a couple of these drawings, you can see the way you've created dimension and shading in the packet, the present up top that the elf, whatever, is looking at. And so already my gears are cranking, thinking like, okay, I get it. You're not just going to make a flat piece of art or a flat picture because of the light show technology that we have that is proprietary and part of Intel's secret sauce. You're able to sort of fold those into space and create those geometric forms. It actually makes, and I'm looking at the reindeer and I think, okay, I get it. You're sort of drawing these individual frames, almost like a traditional animation might have been drawn many years ago, like an old Disney, hand-drawn Lady and the Tramp or, any of those. So are you thinking in frames, or are you thinking, I want to create a scene or a scenario, and what are those elements, and then do you animate from there? I guess I'm trying to figure out more exactly how your brain works to getting to this part of the process.
Yeah, I think it really starts off with figuring out what the client wants to tell as a story and narrative and what the overall goal is. And from the creative side, finding ways to really integrate motion and integrate that next level storytelling with 3D volume. And that's where we start thinking about motion and how that's going to help us tell a story and how one asset moves into the next. And that's what really helps create the impact.
Okay, cool. That's good. In fact, that's actually a good segue into the next slide, because you talked about this sort of volumetric space. I think that's what I'm looking at here, but to be honest, I have no idea what I'm looking at here. So kind of talk to us a little about what it is we're seeing and how you're using this as a tool to be able to bring it from the pencil sketch into reality.
Yeah. So what you see here is after we take those sketches, we'll make those in 3D. So let's say make a 3D shape, and each shape then contains the drone vertexes. And on top of that, we can animate and move that. From that, we'll take that animated mesh and put it into software like this, where we can preview and see what the drones will actually look like. This also allows us to go through technical validation and get the creative assets into a flyable state.
Got it. And so it's almost like I'm thinking this is sort of geometry class, but like turned up to 11 or on like crazy high volume. And so if what I'm seeing here, it's sort of like a flat map of the earth, but in three-dimensional space. It kind of looks like there's some bushes and mountains in there. And then you're creating these rings, these perimeter, sort of the periphery of how far and wide your art can go. And then the shape that we're seeing, all of those little purple dots, those are all representing like literally what's in my hand right here?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And the animator controls every single drone from a 3D perspective, and that's then translated and given over to the pilot.
Got it. So you're really going from kind of old school pencil paper, then bringing in like bold, innovative platforms and technology, but yet we still haven't hit the sky. We still haven't gotten to the ground yet. This is all a way for you to be able to take what's in the mind of the customer, the client, Walmart in this particular case, or Olympics or Super Bowl. They have an idea. You come forth and sketch out and collaborate together on what you could do, because really you can, whatever you can dream up, I'm assuming we can make.
Right.
And then from there, you put it into the computer program, and then you're showing that, so then you can visualize that simulation. Very cool. Okay, so now that I guess in the process we've sort of figured out what it is we're going to make, I guess we want to get to the like, how do we go make it real? So let's go to the next slide. And Shilpa, so this is sort of your part where you then begin to take the reins from Charlene and begin to move incrementally down the path to make these shows reality. Talk to me a little bit about what I'm looking at here, because I see it looks like there's a river. It looks like there's some pictures of cities, some satellite photos, some sketches. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so as a project manager, right, I'm the person that brings all the elements together. So whatever Charlene and her team from creative brings to the table, to what Clay from the logistics, from FAA, the client decides. So you're kind of seeing all those components combined together on the screen here. And you're saying, you see the animation on the left-hand corner, you're seeing this the location of where the client is interested in doing the show.
Okay.
And like we mentioned earlier, we can do a show pretty much anywhere in the world, and we have.
Okay. That's very cool.
Yeah, and we could try to create or assess the airspace that's required based on a number of drones that are going to be taking part in the event or the animation, along with the ground space that's going to be required for our airfield and operations for the team to actually do the test flights and the actual show for the audience.
Got it. So, like, for example, in the picture that we're seeing, that show, I'm assuming, must have been done over a river, over water. And can drones fly over people? Can you do a show directly above someone, or does it have to be a little bit off?
That's a great question. I mean, it'd be great to do over people, but I mean, if you think about it, right? If you're doing it right above people, then they can't really see what Charlene and her team has created.
Oh, you're right.
Right. All they're going to see is drones flying in the air. So you want a certain distance away from the audience, so they can get the whole storyboard that Charlene and her team and the customer has collaborated and want to present to the audience. So,
it makes me think about even the idea of sort of fireworks, because I know that drone light shows are becoming the new replacement for fireworks as sort of the newer, more innovative technology. It's clean, it's quiet, and you're able to sort of create these, whatever shape you want. So you could go beyond just, in the case of July 4th, the flag waving in the air. It's not just an explosion, but it's the flag waving in the air. And I'm thinking about how you don't go see fireworks laying on your back looking straight up. So you kind of need that little bit of space in order to create the sort of those three-dimensional form factors. So very cool indeed. So let's actually go to the next slide, because this one I thought was very interesting when you were kind of walking me through a little bit about what it is that you do behind the scenes. This is a different looking program than the one that Charlene works in. Where are we in the stage? What is it that we're looking at here?
Yeah, so this is at the stage of execution. We're looking at the laptop that the pilot is using to fly all the drones by him or herself. And you're seeing all the drones that are on the airfield and at the location based on the GPS that you had talked about earlier. And this is what Clay, as a pilot, will be using to understand like what drones are, status of each of the drones on his laptop, and to optimize the drones able to fly the animation that has been created.
Got it. So there's like a fingerprint for every single drone. So in this case, I don't know, I'm looking at 1,000 little dots. All of those dots represent an actual real drone, unlike Charlene, where it was a virtual drone.
Correct.
That's a real drone in real space that's sending the exact location and I guess the thumbs up, thumbs down, like the status. And I guess this is before he turns them all green in order to turn it on. It makes me think about the kinds of locations where you can set up and how easily one can set up. And so then that gets me starting to think about sort of, what impacts drone performances. So we got a great question from Darlene about extreme temperatures. So, I know Charlene had mentioned that she's gone to 4 different countries and performed 4 different places around the world. Temperature plays into it, wind plays into it. Tell me a little bit about sort of the extremes of what you can do within a show.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge that we always have is the winds, right? High winds always have an impact because the drones are so lightweight and small that if you think about this is an exaggeration, but a 50 miles per hour wind is going to, push the drones to the side. So we do have that limitation. Temperature-wise, our engineering team has done, a lot of work and tried to come up with procedures that we can do in the snow, cold weather, like we did for Korea Olympics a couple of years ago. Oh
yeah, I guess
Olympics.
Now that I think about it, the Olympic ceremony was it was literally drones over like an ice cold mountain. So okay,
absolutely, it was cool. It was freezing temperatures. Like it was like at minus temperatures.
Okay.
We did that show.
All right, that's very cool.
Yeah, and that's where the logistics parts comes into play, right?
Sure.
Where there's a lot of challenges, and as a PM, I have to work with the team to try to figure out what's the best way to make the show happen. We've done shows in high temperatures as well. It's just a matter of making sure that the environment for the drones is optimal before we do the flight, so it can perform to that the level that we're wanting to show the audience and the clients.
And I guess that's part of the beauty of, literally designing and building a drone from scratch that is specifically for this use case, as opposed to maybe taking a drone, and not in the toy kit sense, but taking maybe a commercial drone and fitting a light to it, fitting GPS to it. Purpose built really allows not only everyone on our team to be safe, but the audience to be safe, but then to also make these performances spectacular and flawless.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool indeed. And then just touch a little bit upon, are there environmental factors with flying the drones, or is that part of the beauty of it, is that it's not creating smoke or sound? It's something that is silent. Tell me a little bit about that, please.
Oh yeah, I mean, it obviously it doesn't. It's LED. There's no smoke. There's no loud noises. And as a pet owner, right, this is fantastic from my perspective, because my dog always goes crazy when she hears the fireworks going off on any of the occasions that we do. So yeah, in that aspect, it's sustainable, right? It's great for the environment, I think. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's honestly why I think I'm beginning to see and hear and read more about how the future firework is a drone light show. So I'm beginning to put the pieces of the puzzle together. We got the idea. The idea gets on paper. The idea gets in the computer. We vet it, make sure it's exactly what we want. Make sure that our partners and the people we work with, it's exactly what they want. Gets into your world. You then ensure that it's all possible, and we can facilitate that show and make it happen, be it above the river, above the mountain, or whatever the case is. And then when actually on the ground, when the drones actually get plugged in or turned on, you're sort of helping facilitate. So I'm tracking us here on, and now I guess that takes us to the actual show itself. So let's go to the next slide. And Clay, I'd mentioned this earlier. This is you actually kneeling in front of drones. So definitely, please tell us what it is we're looking at, because it looks like a bunch of egg cartons or oversized egg cartons. Tell me what's going on here.
Sure. This is a launch field that's set up. As Shilpa mentioned, she does all the planning of where we can fly. And once she plans that out, and then Charlene hands over the creative assets, we then bring a truckload of equipment and we set it up in the place that's been determined. And the main basis of our equipment is the launch pad, which is what you see here. AP asked some question earlier about how the drones charge, and that's one of the main functions of the launch pad. As you can see, there's 6 drones in each launch pad. The launch pad is about the size of a suitcase. Okay. And we can also upload the information that Charlene gives us, which is basically a code that the drones understand, to assign them each a flight plan. And then they all work together to create these images in the sky. So that's how we upload them also, is through the launch pad.
And so I'm looking at dozens upon dozens here. So, and I not only read, but I've seen it. I mean, I saw it in our opening video. Like, we're literally flying thousands of these drones, these things, all at once. And so I understand that it is all pre-programmed. At least I'm sort of putting that together. So kind of reaffirm a little bit about, this idea about it being pre-programmed, and then you as one singular pilot being able to control all 1,000 of these. AP's got a couple of great additional questions that I'd love to hear your answers on those.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, when Charlene creates the creative assets, we turn that into a code that the drones can understand. And when we do that, each drone has its own individual flight plan, whether it's 100 drones, 500, 1,000, 2,000 drones. And that way they all fly a trajectory so that they don't collide into each other. When it comes down to it, after we upload all that information to each drone, then we control the whole fleet with a single laptop. And that laptop is connected to a radio that talks to the drones. And when we do a countdown and are ready for launch, it's basically the push of a single button that makes it all happen.
That's very cool indeed. And so you would mention how it's programmed in the sense that so the drones don't collide into each other. What happens if there are birds or animals, or is there ever any, like, how do we know where we are in space or up in the sky to ensure that where we are cool and we are able to create the picture and yet not harm any birds that are up in the air?
Absolutely. Generally birds stay away from the drones. There, we have some in one of our test locations that are kind of curious about the drones, but they definitely keep their distance. We've also done studies where birds are nesting and so forth, and the drones are relatively quiet, about to sound like a swarm of bees sometimes, and the birds seem completely unaffected by the presence of the drones.
Oh, cool. Well, I guess that not only plays to the idea of what Shilpa was talking about the sustainability, about the quiet, but then also plays to sort of the environmental factors that it's actually kind of good, as opposed to maybe those fireworks going off with the frightening booms that come with it. So in our narrative here, I'm getting it. I'm tracking everything that's happening. You've shown up now. You said you kind of back up a truck and unload these sort of suitcases. So you're telling that everywhere we do a performance around the world, we fly the drones or drive the drones to be able to get to that location, unpack the suitcases, if you will, and then that's when you connect all the dots. You plug into the radio, plug into the computer, and then hit play. Right? Is that kind of is that how it works?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
It does take quite a bit of equipment, and we need lots of power from generator or shore power. And once we get everything connected, we do the show, and then we pack everything up and go on to the next city.
Go to the next show. Okay, cool. So let's actually go to the next slide. So this is probably one of my favorite images. And when I see this in video, and you saw it in a little bit in the earlier video, when the takeoff and the landing is just mesmerizing. It's total like Ride of the Valkyries for me. I'm like, that's so cool. And so if I'm seeing this correctly, all those little the purple and the green that are in the bottom of that picture, that's all the suitcase thing, the thing that those are all the drones in sort of their landing zones that you were kneeling in. And everything that I'm looking up in the air, these are all the drones. In this case, I don't know, 500, 1,000. These are all taking off to then go make the art in the sky. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is during the launch sequence. It looks like we have about 100 launch pads in this photograph set up, and we're probably flying 500 is my guess from the photograph. I don't remember exactly, but they all, like I said, they all kind of take off in a staggered fashion so that they don't hit each other, and they all go into position, and then right on cue with the perfect timing, they'll start the animation that Charlene created in her 3D programs.
Excellent. And so Darlene actually asked a very cool question about all of our proprietary software. And you talk about the computer you use. We talk about the computer that Shilpa uses, and even Charlene. I'm assuming everything is protected somehow and can't be hacked. I'm assuming we're cool. So it's no nefarious folks can go ahead and take over the drones and have them go say something else in the sky. Is that correct?
Yeah, our engineers have created a pretty safe system. We're not connected to the internet or anything like that when we fly, so there's no issues with that. And the drones work off some proprietary frequency channel hopping, and we've never had an issue. We've tried to hack it ourselves, and we just can't get into it. So it's a safe system.
I guess that's also one of the perks of being one of the top big 5 technology companies on the planet. Being part of the Intel family allows you to be able to knock on the door of some of the brightest minds in the world to be able to then help build a standalone system, purpose-built drone itself, the technology, what goes into the program, the computer that's powering it, et cetera. It's cool to see kind of how all the parts now work together in order to put the show to make a performance happen. Let's go to the next slide. This one is probably my favorite. I mean, I do love that other picture, but this one, I think to see really this to me is the 3 of you working in perfect harmony. And you can see these 3 stages. We've got animate on the left. That was from that original one, the first slide that we looked at that Charlene talked about. Those animated frames of a reindeer galloping. And then the second image, that rotating GIF that's in there, That's computer program. So that's not real drone. That's actually just computer loop. That's showing us that we took the idea from Charlene, it got plugged into the computer program. So then Shilpa then looks at that program and thinks, okay, that's what it's like in virtual world. Let's go get to the real world. Then that gets Shilpa to set up over on the right-hand side where that was, correct me if I'm wrong here, but was actually one of the, I don't know what location that was. That looks like a giant screen on the left and you can see some cars and reflection of buildings. But that's actually the actual drawing that started over on the left, ended up over on the right to impress the audiences and put on an amazing performance. So kind of open forum, any of you, tell me about how long does it take this process to make this happen from what we see on the left to what we see on the right?
It's about 4 to 6 weeks to do the entire process from start to finish.
Interesting. And then do you find that certain locations are easier, so they're faster, or maybe you're setting up in a parking lot, or there's more logistics and maybe you need Clay's insight from a regulation standpoint, if it's maybe closer to buildings?
Those are all those are challenges that we incorporate for every show and look at, right? When we do a site survey, we look at all those obstacles and issues that we have to potentially look at to address before we even have the team on the ground for execution phase.
Got it.
Each show has its own challenges.
Clay, if you could be so kind and just answer a question that Drake had about what are the technical skills required to actually be a drone pilot. So it's cool to see how your progression, but are there actual skills? And if you're interested in this as a career, do you have to become an air traffic controller or no?
No. That's a great question from Drake. There's several steps to becoming a pilot, drone pilot. The first thing that I would recommend is learning about the rules of the airspace and where you can and cannot fly. And if you do a search for Part 107, you'll see the FAA has some standards set out, and you can actually, after studying for the test, you can take a test and become a certified, what they call a remote pilot. And then once you have that certification, my suggestion is to start out with a very inexpensive drone and go to a very large park where there's no people around and just start, learning the basic skills of flying a drone. And as you practice a little bit here and there, and you get better and better, then you can upgrade to a different, more expensive drone if you like, depending on what you want to do. And so there's definitely some certifications required in becoming a pilot, but anybody can do that. Just do a search for Part 107 certification, and there's all kinds of information on the internet about that.
Got it. Very cool indeed. Thank you. And again, I go back to this idea of all three of you are pivotal. The shows don't happen without the expertise that the three of you bring, and all three of you come from such different backgrounds, and to hear the narrative of how it comes together is really impressive. So Charlene, I was asking, when you look at this slide where it goes from your initial drawing, your sketch in the notebook, to the actual performance over on the right, what's the feeling you get? And kind of tell us a little bit about what it's like to see your vision become reality from a little tiny 2-inch sketch to something that's hundreds of feet up in the air.
Yeah, I would say it's always humbling, especially since on the computer, it really only looks maybe like 3 inches by 3 inches. And once it's in the sky, it's, meters by meters, like hundreds. And so it's always impactful. But I think the most rewarding is really watching the client and the audience. That's who I look at when a show flies, because that's the most rewarding aspect, is seeing not only the client's journey from something they don't understand, it's an emerging technology, to being confused, then to understanding and just letting the process happen, all the way to the audience just being shocked by never seeing something like this before. So it's always very rewarding in that way.
Very cool indeed. We just have a couple of minutes left, and so I just want to put the message back out to our audience and all of our panelists, all of our guests who've been with us today. If you have any other questions, by all means, let's get it in the chat now, kind of before we end. And so, you know, in hearing so much about the story and really the science behind the art, I thought, why not take a look at the actual art? So we've talked a lot about the development of this Walmart holiday show that we put on this past holiday season. Why don't we go to the next video and let's actually take a look at a little 45 second, 1 minute highlight reel from that show. Very cool indeed. It's so cool to think that it just goes from an idea all the way to an actual performance that truly touches the lives of millions upon millions of people. You don't have to be in person to see it and experience it. Just the way technology is nowadays, and the way you can use the sort of the social networking to be able to put that message out. And I think I saw a statistic that said that almost 500 million people experience that holiday drone show. So it's just very, very cool indeed. So I'm super appreciative for all the time that you gave us as our guest today and attending today's conversation. I just couldn't be more thankful to Charlene and Shilpa and Clay. You've just been too kind and too generous with your time to be able to walk our audience through and tell them kind of what it takes to make these shows reality. I thought maybe just in our last couple minutes, maybe just give us kind of one final thought of inspiration to our high school students that are participating with us today. Charlene, one final thought from you?
Yeah, I would say as a creative and as someone like you might be interested in 3D, don't let the interfaces or having to know about scripting intimidate you. I'm just a 3D like art person. I don't know anything about scripting, and you can still be a technical artist. So don't let that stop you.
Cool. Very cool indeed. What about you, Shilpa? Any last words of wisdom?
I think from my perspective, don't confine yourself to one path. Just because you don't have to have a 10-year plan. You could have a plan for the next couple of years and then find a path within those couple of years to the next career, which is what I've done, right? The path that I chose was totally different, and I didn't have this idea of becoming a PM for Drone Light Show. It just kind of happened, and it was a great opportunity. So don't think that you can't have a second, third career after your first career that you decided upon.
I'm still working on my first one, so that's good. That's good to hear. And then Clay, from you, my friend, what would be your last words for our audience today?
Absolutely. I say just follow your passion. One thing I love about working at Intel is I'm surrounded by some of the smartest, most creative, most motivated people in the world. And no matter what your walk in life is and what your passion is and what your strengths are, those can be used to join a team that can do some amazing things. So just find your passion, stick with it, and hopefully you can join a team someday that does some great things.
Awesome. And thank you for you choosing that background, by the way. It's so cool to see the show that was your favorite kind of actually real. That's cool. So thank you. So again, thank all three of you so much for taking the time today and really walking us through it. It was super exciting. I really enjoyed the conversation to think about what goes from a toy all the way to the real thing and the drone itself, from the animations to the actual performance. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for everyone who attended our conversation today. It is going to be recorded. It will be on the Walmart YouTube channel. And please, you let Walmart know that you might want to see a holiday drone show in your future, a light show in your future. So let them know. We hope to come back again this time next year after another great run of performances around the country. So thank you all. Be well, stay safe, and take care.